Okay. Thanks to everyone for being nice and on time for or creating a buzz with your Facebook challenge branding Give Panel Stacks webinar. Um, I'm your host. Faith is your co-host. We both work for Give Panel. I have previously worked for the Matter Hospital Foundation, still do a bit of work for them. Absolutely love those guys, and we'll be referencing my fundraising lived experience in this deck. But what we're here to talk about in 30 minutes is how does providing a good brand for your Facebook challenge create a buzz? How can you implement branding in the different stages? So like recruitment, participation, retention. How can you budget, right? Like we all know that branding or providing a brand actually costs money. So how do you budget for that and how do you cover it? And then we'll have I think 10 to 15 minutes of a Q&A. I'm going to try and be time efficient. And so I've started my little stopwatch. So before we dive in, while people are still joining, how can good branding create a buzz for your Facebook challenge, right? So the very first thing to know is that what is good branding, right? So good branding is a unique, memorable identity. It drives a low cost per acquisition. It drives high retention. It drives high warm acquisition. And it's a key to building bridges from the island to Facebook challenges. So what does that mean? So in this photo, you see members of the Irish UN peacekeeping forces in Syria, and they're weighing 100 miles branding. And the 100 miles began as a Facebook challenge, 100 miles in a month for the Matter Foundation, began in 2018 as a Facebook challenge. And then it branched out, and now it brings in quite a lot of what we call corporate funding. So it built a bridge from the island of Facebook challenges over into corporate funding land. And you can see that, you can see how important the brand was to that in this shot. Okay. So good branding is not, and this actually is something from lived experience. So good branding is not a waste of money. People are always like, when they see branded merch, they immediately think it's a waste of money. Just like when, people talk about charity professionals getting paid salaries are like, oh, what a waste. Why don't they all just do it on volunteering? It's the same thing. Good branding is not a waste of money in the same way that paying your staff is not. It actually contributes to higher income. It's not a cheap gimmick, which I found out. So I originally had this idea for sunglasses with a running challenge, and it didn't work because it was a cheap gimmick. So good branding is not a cheap gimmick. It is not a brainstorm. Okay. Everyone knows brainstorms, but they are just not enough. You need research. Brainstorming is not researching. So you need market research. Good branding is not an hour together around the table. And good branding is not a shortcut. It actually takes a lot of work. So when you put in that work, what you get is something that is quite memorable that lasts for a very long time. So 100 miles in a month is still a flagship challenge for the Matter Foundation, pretty much 6 years on. And you can see that reflected in this post where this guy, Jared Delaney, has been coming back. He's done 9 of these events and he still raises money. So he was a great buy. And the reason that he comes back is because this is a memorable challenge. And you can see that with the fact that he's kept all of his medals. So when you're branding your Facebook challenge, you're going to do it in stages. And we're going to talk through those stages through this deck. So we've got planning, recruiting, participation, and budgeting.
Perfect. So we will start up with, how do nonprofits plan to brand their Facebook challenge?
Thank you, Faith. So when you're planning to brand your Facebook challenge, right, the first thing you need to do is get buy-in from your team. So you're going to need to give a presentation just like me. You're going to need to give a presentation just like this one where you get buy-in, okay? Because again, like any cost, every charity person is going to be like, why are we spending more money? What's the point of this? So plan this 8 weeks before recruitment. You're also going to you're going to need a number of assets to bring your brand to life. Okay, a brand is more than just a sentence. You need to give it a creative identity. And you're going to need just like Red Bull or Nike, right? You're going to need brand ambassadors. You might call them champions. You're going to need people going out there, like representing your brand, just like the merch does. So what that looks like, what that process looks like, is a little bit like this. Faith, have you ever watched Succession?
I actually haven't yet. I feel like it's going to have to be on the list.
And you might not be the only one. I'm obviously obsessed with Succession. So, like, what you need to know is this flow chart has a theme, but it's not important to understand the theme. So basically, it starts off with you presenting why. Like we said, you're gonna have to be just like me and give everyone a presentation as to why your challenge needs a brand. And this presentation should equip you with those skills. You need to get buy-in from senior leadership. You're going to just get buy-in at the initial stage with the idea that there should be a brand. That's what you're looking for, to get buy-in on what branding does. And I'm going to help you explain what branding does. Then you're going to need to research. Before you build a brand, you need to research, and that is not a brainstorm. After you research, you might have 3 or 4 looks or 3 or 4 potential identities for your challenge, visual identities, and you're going to user test those. Okay. Then you might get mock-ups done from a creative designer and user test those again. And once you've got a winner, you go back to leadership and you get buy-in, and then you go out. Okay, so that's what this process represents, that journey. So that's the planning stage of it. To help you explain how useful it is, I've got more slides.
Perfect. What does branding look like for the recruitment and the retention stages for our nonprofits?
Thank you. So what it looks like in recruitment and retention is something like this, right? So in recruitment, I've prepared this to help you with the why bother spend any money on this. So here you have like branding and recruitment. This is actually an ad. This is like, this image was one of the winning creatives for the best version of 100 Miles in a Month for the Matter Foundation. And all things being equal, right? So every sign up got the same user journey. You can attribute 40% of the total funds raised to this image, right? And then this image is similar. It's actually just, so this is a medal, this is a cheap graphic, but it again represents a brand for a separate challenge, which was 10,000 steps, and it raised 60%. So all of these, like this brand identity is responsible for raising money. That's the point of this slide. And what branding looks like in recruitment is basically, it looks like lead magnets. It looks like incentives. It looks like a visual representation of the identity that you've created for your challenge. And it will help drive you money, is the point of this. Now, there are all different types of branding. There is expensive branding, inexpensive branding, and no branding. So like here you have the Pride Run, which I'm going to talk about later on. And they went all out with the t-shirt. Here you've got the Dicky Dip. It's a Dicky bow. That's not that expensive. And here you've got no branding, which is where many people go down. This is the route that many people go down, and it is not effective. And I know, because those are my legs, and I've been there, and I know that no branding is not effective. And again, it pays off in terms of retention. So when you brand, you will see people come back. At the recruitment stage, you will see people come back, and that is a payoff. Again, so better branding means a little bit more spending, but it also means better ads, better cost per acquisition, more retention, and ultimately it means savings. You save more than you spend if you do a good brand. So that's it during recruitment.
Amazing. So we've planned the initial idea. We know how to plan to brand. We've got the recruitment and the retention stages. What does branding look like for the actual challenge participation?
So what it's like for the participation is a massive boost, a massive help to your supporter. Branding during participation is that classic, help me, help you, help me, right? So it's like your supporter, they obviously need a strong cover image if they're going to stand out in the news feed with loads of celebrities, loads of different ads, loads of different offers. They need a strong cover image for their fundraiser. They need a clear tagline, like that tells people what the challenge is doing. It's brilliant if you can give them a physical identifier, which makes them feel part of a community. And it's even better if you can give them a physical signifier, like a medal, which signifies to them what that challenge did and helps them remember what they achieved. So here's what that looks like in actuality, right? Here you have a clear fundraiser image. It's like it tells you what the challenge is, it tells you when it's happening, it tells you what it's doing, it tells you who it's for, and it helped Kathleen raise money. And here again, you have a good example of like, here's the challenge and here is what it's doing. Okay, those two things are very, very important to couple together. Who exactly is it helping? That should be immediately apparent. And again, here's an asset that is like, again, it doesn't say who it's helping, but it visually kind of represents that person, if you get me. It visually represents a breast cancer patient. So again, when you do this during participation, you are helping the supporter to help you. Finally.
Perfect. And we all know, working with our nonprofits, that budgets are a big thing. So how can our nonprofits achieve branding on a budget?
Yeah, this is, I know, like a super important part of this deck, which is why I've saved it for last. And because we all know that things cost money and that branding actually represents an upfront risk. So when you're branding on a budget, you need to price out the different elements. You might have, like we've talked about before, you might have t-shirts, you might have medals, and you might also go with something a little bit of a lower lift, like a dicky bow. It's really important that the incentive or the physical merch makes sense. That's why I had those sunglasses at the start. Those sunglasses actually were just a gimmick. They didn't actually really make sense for that challenge, and so it didn't work. So it's important that your assets make sense. Once you've priced all of those up, I'm going to talk you through a case study on how you be able to afford it. So this is the Dublin Pride Run. It's actually run by friends of mine that belong to a club called Dublin Front Runners. And this year they had a huge, massive success because previously this brand has been run on like relatively cheap cotton t-shirts, like not too much branding on them. This time they went big. They actually got my friend here, Ger Byrne, who's a creative director, and he came up with like all of these kind of like colorful items here. He started putting them in ads and he started putting them out on social media, and they like at least doubled their fundraising for three important LGBTQ plus charities. And how did they do this? Well, like they're a voluntary committee. They have no actual funding. They have no funding. No one draws a salary. But what they were able to do, they were really, really brave. They made a commitment to Ger. The committee did. They made a commitment to this guy that, yeah, we see your vision. We want to help you make this event bigger. And they went out and they got corporate sponsorship. So they were able to pitch this idea to a number of different corporates, which are kind of covered here, like Arthur Cox was a big help to them, I think. And they got like £16,000 in corporate sponsorship, which actually covered them for the t-shirt. So that covered the t-shirt costs. So even though like none of them drew a salary, they're absolutely tiny. They don't even have a GitHub account. Like they're super small. And I only know about it because I was directly involved in this campaign and I was helping Ger recruit people. And because they went and built a brand that cost lots of money, they were then able to double how much money they raised for charities as a result. So it is possible and desirable for small nonprofits to brand their events, in my opinion. So the takeaways: good branding takes work and it represents an additional cost. But ads showcasing a good brand will deliver lots of cheap leads. Good branding will also drive registrations, fundraisers, and retention. Donors are more likely to donate to a challenge that has a strong visual identity. That's what a brand is, a strong, memorable visual identity. And corporate sponsorship can really help cover the costs that come along or are associated with branding your challenge. So let's dive in.
Amazing. We have a couple of questions already. I will let people have a couple of minutes as well while we answer the first two to add any questions you may have. But we will start off with Shannon from Dementia UK has a question around branding repeat events. Do you have any tips for this? They want to have a clear brand identity for their challenges whilst keeping things fresh for repeat supporters so that the experience doesn't feel repetitive.
I love that. All right, brilliant. I didn't anticipate that kind of question. I thought I'd get more pushback. But let me just go to a slide that visually represents this. So it's most charities have like standard branding for their main charity page, right? And what you kind of need to do is go off for an event and create different branding for that event. So like the Matter Foundation has no real association with the color green, or didn't in its what do they call that, in its brand guidelines? Yeah, your brand guidelines. They didn't have, so you have to kind of create brand guidelines for your event that give you a color palette to work off. And once you have a color palette, you could kind of change the styling every so often, change the font every so often, and it gives you way more flexibility. Like you can see here that the last medal and the first medal have like literally nothing in common. So you need that kind of like, you need greater flexibility than you have from your official charity brand guidelines. That's how you're going to be able to like keep it going.
Perfect. Angela has asked, where are you getting the medals from for between £4 and £7? So where have you pulled the costs from? And
so where we
any
pull the
recommendations?
costs here is from a supplier. It's from a supplier called Run My Events. They do a number of very, very large events like marathons, lots of marathons, basically non-stop running events. And we were able to, like, what you had to do to get that price was sign a bulk deal. So not a once-off for this specific event. They, like, you would do a year-long contract with them. You would give them the total orders up front, and then you would basically pay it all in one go. And it worked out that it brought the cost per medal down by a lot. So you do your whole, you basically go to a supplier and give them your year forecast. And then you like, it's basically economies of scale.
Fabulous, thank you. And Laura has asked, how do you tackle the issue of corporates wanting their logo to be on t-shirts if they donate to your charity for the event? They try and steer away from this so that the t-shirts can be used again if that corporate sponsor does not buy into the next event.
Right. So I love the first part of the question, but don't know the second part. So the first part of your question is, how do you keep the corporates from taking over your brand so that it looks like the corporates are running the challenge? It is a massive, it's all negotiation. So if you basically have to think to yourself, what is the corporate getting out of this? Like they have to be getting access to a certain number of people, and they have to somehow onboard those people into their own funnel. So what you can give, like you can look at creating a bespoke discount code. You can look at them doing a number of posts in the group. But I agree, try keep them off the t-shirts, because it will quickly become like, even in Ireland, like we had these like public bikes, and they were called like the Coca-Cola bikes, because there was this corporate sponsor so strongly associated to them. So keep them off your merch and give them like access to like virtual goodie bags, coupons, post in the group, stuff like that. You are going to have to negotiate. They are going to have to get something out of it. They're not just going to sponsor you for nothing. So it's all about like figuring out what areas you can sell on and what areas you can't.
Thank you. And Jessica has asked, for paid advertising, do you find that static image ads work better than video or moving image ads? Is there any creative direction that particularly works well every time?
Oh, great question. So static images still work well on Facebook, still work well in the news feeds. They don't work well in they don't work as well in stories and stuff like that. It depends on what you're trying to do. So to give you like an unboxing video where someone takes out like your t-shirt, that will work best, has like a video. It really depends on, like, rather than decide what the format is and like the format's always going to win, it really depends on the creative. What's the idea of the creative? What you want the person to do. So this static image worked really, really well. And so did this one. But unboxing videos can like give us the person a sense of like first person, they're receiving it themselves. So it's really about you having a concept, you having an idea, and then you're like, what is the best vehicle for this idea? What am I trying to do with this idea? And you really have to like, think to yourself, what's the impression you're trying to give? Like even from, I want someone to feel like they have just received this envelope and they're opening it. That's a video. Whereas like, I want someone to, let me go back here. I want someone to imagine they're helping the front line. This I think worked really, really well as a static image because it allowed them to take in this sentence really clearly. Does that help?
Thanks, David. Angela has asked, do you have any guides for requesting corporate sponsorship?
Yeah, I mean, like I don't have a template guide because I've always kind of pitched to the corporate. I find like it's kind of like to me, it's like when you write your CV, your cover letter, it's like you have to make an individual pitch every single time. You can't just like, here's the cover letter, guys. Like, this is what you send with your CV. It will get you in the door every single time. Like for me, it's like, what does this particular corporate stand to gain? The best guide I can give you for corporate sponsorship is you really have to think like they're a marketing person. What are they getting out of it? And you have to make it sound like it's a good deal for them because you're asking for a lot of money up front. It is totally possible to do it though, even from small groups. It can be like you might think, what is like a key time of year? Is this cancer month, for example? Is like November's Men's Cancer Awareness Month. So could you be going to like whiskey companies? Like I'm literally involved in an event at the moment that's gone to a whiskey company for sponsorship because it's November. So I think that's like general advice, but I would stay away from template decks.
Amazing, super helpful. Thank you. We don't have any more questions. We do have time left if anybody does have any. I will just cover a couple of other bits whilst I'm letting anybody type any last questions in. At the very end of the webinar, a little survey will pop up inside Zoom. So as soon as we end the webinar, it'll be a quick pop-up. We would really appreciate if you could fill that out for us. It helps us, it helps guide us what the content you would like to see and how we can format that in future. And everybody will also be receiving the recording and the deck afterwards as well. And as I was talking, we had another question come in. So we have another one from Zoe. You mentioned that the unbranded image of you running didn't perform as well as other ads. What evidence metrics showed that it was the lack of branding that was the issue rather than the image used or the challenge itself?
Well, so I've used this particular challenge a few times, and every time I've like 100 miles in a month, every time I've run it with merch or been able to run it with merch. Normally, what like the biggest problem for this one was just the timeline, the timing. But yeah, I've done this concept a good few times, and every time that it has decent merch backing it up, it's performed well. Did I like in order to go and answer your question, was it A/B tested? It wasn't because I didn't have an image where we had a brand. Do you know what I mean? So I think it would be quite difficult to A/B test for a brand. You're gonna have to like kind of extrapolate from learnings, when you invest in challenges and give them a visual identity, how do they perform versus when you don't invest in them. And all I can tell you is every single time I've seen a challenge go out like this, where all we have is like a graphic and there's been no investment in anything further to that. And there's lots of charities who do this. This isn't like a once-off thing. Lots of charities will come up with a concept and put no money behind the concept. And it will just sound like there's just so much competition at the moment that it will sound like every single other ad that they're seeing out there where people are minimizing their risk by just going out there with like a sentence. And it will perform to a certain level. And then other people will put in a bit more money, a bit more effort, and it will perform to a better level. But I've never A/B tested them because by its nature, it's not something you really A/B test. If you invest in a brand, you're not going to really like run unbranded ads.
Wonderful. Jennifer has asked, is Facebook the best place to advertise these challenges? Have you ever recruited people for a Facebook challenge a different way?
Oh, great question. So for Facebook, I've seen a good few people try different channels, and I completely believe that there will come a challenge where like you try a different challenge or channel, you will try a different platform and it will work amazingly, but people are still trying to crack that. Yeah, they're still trying to crack it. So if you're going out for a Facebook challenge, the best place is still Facebook. Just the data says it's the best place, right? But I strongly believe that there will come a person who cracks Instagram. Like I strongly believe that. It just hasn't happened yet. So data says Facebook. I believe that someone will crack Instagram sooner or later.
Amazing. Let me have a look. And we've got one from Diane. What are your thoughts on offering a medal or second incentive to people on reaching their fundraising target? By how much does a second incentive typically boost donations?
Nice one. Right. So the second incentive, let me be clear, right? I think that like you shouldn't associate it with reaching a fundraising target because you've gone out and you've advertised. So you've advertised to like a lot of people that they should do let's say 100 miles in a month or 1,000 crunches in a month, and you should incentivize them to post proof of them completing that challenge to their fundraising page in order to get a medal. So you're really incentivizing them to be accountable. Now, there's many different ways you can post medals based on whether someone has posted to their page. The vast majority of zero fundraisers never have posts on their page. But just to be super clear, like the people who are going to the people who are motivated by fundraising for your organization typically represent 20% of your leads. They are warm, they are affiliated, and they are going to achieve their target, not because of some like competition, but because they believe in your cause. The rest of the people have signed up to do a challenge that like they want to be held accountable to. They want to get fitter, and you should reward them for physically completing that challenge and proving it. Now, if they post to their fundraising page, they're 7 times more likely to get a donation. Based on a study I did in America, they're 7 times more likely to get a donation. So you should basically give people a second item for continuing to post to their fundraising page. So if someone's posted like 5 times over the month, that represents that they've done 100 miles on their fundraising page, you give them a medal. I can like follow up on exactly how this process works at scale, how are you able to do that at scale. I can follow up over email. But I would not tie the fundraising medals to a certain income level. I would tie it to doing the challenge, because that way you're going to reach a wider audience of people, and you're fulfilling your promise to them. Your promise to them is, I care that you do this challenge. I want you to get fitter and at the same time help my cause. So hopefully that helps.
Thanks, David. And Tony has asked, we've kind of covered this in the last one, but I would also like your thoughts just on the initial incentive. Is it bad to use money limits for users to get incentives to make sure people are signing up to actually fundraise? For example, raise £20 to get a free t-shirt. So adding a fundraising incentive to the initial item.
So how I look at it is basically, because I've looked at it from a tech point of view. So what you're really trying to do is get as many people. This is the volume game. So you're trying to get as many leads as possible to go to your registration form, right? You want all your leads to go to your registration form. And the incentive is there to get it's first there to get people clicking on this ad. So they click. And then you want those people to click onto the form. And at which point you've got like 60 to 70% of those people will convert. So you should incentive registration, right? Because you want to get as many 100 leads. Say you have 100 leads, you want to get like 70% of them to go to the form, right? It's a volume game. So how do you get them to go to the form? You say, I will give you a t-shirt, and you can decide to like say, all right, I will only give a t-shirt to people who are fundraising, but don't put an income threshold for it. Just like ideally you would just give it to them for setting up a fundraising page. That would be my way of doing it. You'd give it to people who are going to set up a fundraising page, and give them all an incentive. Because if you have a ton of zeros, then like if your problem is, I get in way too many people who raise nothing, that's a problem with your targeting. You're not targeting the right people. So I know that I'm getting confused, but it's like you try and get as many people to go to the registration form, so you incentivize people to register and create a fundraiser. You don't incentivize them to raise money, because that will slow down how many t-shirts you're able to send out, and it will also confuse the messaging. People will be like, oh, I have to raise a certain amount of money in order to get a t-shirt. Well, this challenge isn't for me. They'll immediately write themselves off. One person put this in a way better way than I have. They said, you're not in the business of selling t-shirts. You're in the business of like challenge fundraising, getting as many people to feel like they can take on the challenge as possible. So that's a more succinct way of saying it. You're not trying to sell t-shirts. You're trying to get as many people as possible to feel like they can do the challenge, register and complete a fundraiser and create a fundraising page for you.
Amazing. Thank you for that, David. That is all of our questions today. So we will leave it at that point. Thank you for joining us and being our host today. It was brilliant. And like I say, as I mentioned, any further questions, everybody has a customer success manager here at Give Panel, so feel free to reach out and have a further chat with your CSM. You will all receive the recording and the deck, and there will be a quick short survey that pops up at the very end. Thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully see you at the next Stacks webinar.
See you guys.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.